now live on YouTube and the Metabolic Movement. Thank you very much for joining me. This is Sarah Bayliss. She is the author of a book called Do Nourish, subtitled How to Eat for Resilience. And I'm really excited to talk to Sarah because I've learned a lot from her book. And what I really like about it, we'll talk about it in depth soon, but what I really like about it is it's got a really personalizable action plan that you can take away and do stuff yourself. But what I'd really like to do, Sarah, to start off with is hear a little bit about your personal story, because you haven't always been a nutritionist, have you?
No, I haven't. Thank you for having me here. It's an honour to be chatting with you. So, yes, thank you. So, before I retrained in nutrition, I left uni, went into marketing essentially, and spent about 15 years working in the marketing and events industry, of which I had a love-hate relationship with it. It was incredibly hard work, and it essentially hard work, stressful environment. You're sort of on a lot of the time, long hours, and it sort of led me down a path of not really taking care of myself. And the outcome of that was about 10 to 15 years into the job, I sort of nearly hit burnout. And I didn't recognize those symptoms of burnout at the time. I just wasn't feeling great. And actually some of the symptoms most of us can normalize in today's sort of challenging environment around work and stress and number of aspects that may be depleting us. But for me, it was sort of brain fog, low mood, anxiety, digestive issues, stomach cramps, hormonal imbalances, challenges with my general overall energy was pretty much on the floor, and my weight was persistently changing as well. And there was a sort of shift in my work life where I moved client side for a period of time, and it changed the amount of work I was doing, the stress I was up against. And I realized for the first time in that sort of change that maybe I need to start looking after myself. And I began changing my nutrition. I did a lot of reading, and the first step I made was actually to eat 3 meals a day and to eat proper food. Before that point, I had been skipping meals, running on cortisol, sugar, caffeine, thinking that was a thing to do. And it was making me sicker and actually stealing my energy rather than giving me energy. So the first step I made was, right, let's try and eat 3 meals a day. And things just spiraled from there. And I started to really recognize very quickly how I changed within about 2 months. My whole metabolism changed, my energy changed, my sleep changed, my resilience to life changed. I could deal with everything much better. And I felt happier. And I was like, what has happened here? And it sort of opened up this world of going, right, I need to know more about the body. How come I do not know how the body works? How has this skipped me to this date? How have I not been taught about the role of nutrition, the role of eating, how it impacts our brain function, our energy, etc. So I read everything I could and decided that I needed to go back to study. And I essentially left London, moved to Bristol, went back and studied for 3 years and came out with a qualification and set my own business up. So, my work now is literally driven by my own story of helping myself improve really quite quickly. And just initially, it was just looking at food, and then things then started improving from there, and I got into other areas of wellness. But yeah, that's sort of my story in a snippet.
That's a heck of a story, and I think for anyone who's going through burnout, that's an inspiration that you can kind of come out the other side. So well done for doing that. You mentioned the word resilience, and that's something that you worked on. How would you define resilience? What does it mean?
So when I think about resilience, what I'm thinking about is, and there's more science way of saying it and a more simple way of saying it. But, you know, we, from a nutrition perspective, I think about the word metabolic reserve. This is our body's capacity to deal with external demands, okay? Whether that is stress, whether that is bad nutrition, whether that is viruses, bugs. And we're facing these things day in, day out. And for example, if we get sick, our immune system goes down, we rest and we recover. And I see resilience as this ability to bounce back quicker when you have some level of insult. And that insult can be, as I said, it can be a bug. It could be the fact that you've had a period of high stress, high demand. It could be the fact that, you know, poor sleep, whatever the scenarios are, it's our ability to bounce back from a situation that's pulled on a lot of our reserves, and it sort of leaves you a bit depleted. And resilience is that ability to recover quicker, faster, and then get back to balance. And it's not about not getting sick or not getting stressed or, you know, having the perfect sleep. It's about when things occur that disrupt your rhythm, your energy, you're able to deal with it quicker and recover quicker. That's sort of how I look at resilience. Does that make sense?
It does. I think so many things that we learn about in the world of nutrition, diet, and all that kind of stuff is everything seems to be one size fits all. And you just mentioned how much things change. Like you get a bug, everything changes. You have to reset all the time. So did you find it frustrating kind of going through the nutrition learning process and learning about all these different techniques? Was it hard to learn?
It was definitely hard to learn in terms of, you know, going from a marketing world back into a science-based world, which I'd never been in before, and started, you know, spending a year in biochemistry was incredibly difficult. I had to learn a whole new language, to be honest, and it was a real challenge. You know, so, you know, with, you know, my story as well, the fact that having struggled with learning difficulties and dyslexia when I was younger, fear of, you know, of which I am dyslexic, but I've always had a fear of learning, and, you know, science has always been scary, right? But it's one of those things that for me, it was, if I didn't do it, I wouldn't know. So the actual fear of not understanding and changing myself and what I wanted to do was more important to me than the fear of learning. You know, you just have to keep going. You just keep at it. You know, learning is difficult, and anything new is, and it's like challenging to the brain. But every time you challenge yourself, what happens is you just get stronger. So in fact, it's some form of some degree of resilience.
I think the question I'm leading you into now here is basically, if it's like you've overcome learning difficulties and you've got an extraordinary journey, you've become a successful author in this field, and you're also doing research as well, writing research papers, and you've got some interesting work coming up. What hope is there for the rest of us when it comes to every time we turn on the news or like, you know, log onto your phone, you see a different competing bit of information about nutrition? How are we supposed to kind of navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, that is incredibly difficult. And, you know, a lot of the things we hear are quite polarizing because they grab media, right? That's the point. They're trying to grab attention. I think that this was one of the reasons I wrote the book, to be honest, was actually, what does it mean to feed the body well? What does that actually mean? And so taking away the complexity of, should I be on a ketogenic diet? Should I be on a Mediterranean diet? Should I be eating fats? Should I not be eating fats? You know, we will always see some level of science that supports or doesn't support a potential theory. So I was like, okay. And being on the journey myself and having worked with clients, the way I approached the book was under the one concept of feed the body the nutrients it cannot meet. Feed the body the nutrients it needs and cannot make. So from a very basic perspective, when you feed the body what it needs and cannot make, you are going to be feeding it to function well. You know, you're going to be building all of the cells to do their jobs well, because they have the nutrients, and the cells do their jobs well, the organs then function, and then you have health. So my book was about, well, what does that mean? How do we make nutrition simple? And it came from that basic line. And what I do is I break it down into, okay, so macronutrients and micronutrients, and I basically talk about, out of all of those, what is it we have to feed ourselves? So if you could only feed yourself the core nutrients we need to function, what would that be? And when you think about it from that perspective, you can start stripping away any narratives around the media, or this person says that, or I should do that, I should do this. It almost goes down to sort of biochemistry, really, at a very simple level. And therefore you can start to see, okay, well, if I know I need to be eating amino acids, so proteins, and I know that I like these type of proteins, well, that's going to work for me. So I'm going to feed myself those nutrients. And that's where the book comes from. So rather than going, you know, diet specific, I'm talking about principles. What are the key principles to feeding the body well so that you can function well? And it can work for everybody and anybody according to what they want to eat, their preferences. You know, at the very basics is, you need to be eating whole foods. You don't want to be eating processed foods. But when you eat food that's closest to nature, that's a whole food. And then how do you balance your plate? What does that plate look like when you're feeding the body the nutrients it needs and cannot make? And I essentially break that down. And when we start to eat like that, we build ourselves. We build our brain, our hormones, our immune system, our gut lining, so we can thrive. Does that answer the question?
It does. So let's talk about, you were talking about macronutrients. You mentioned protein. Where do you stand on fat, and whether we should be eating fat or not?
So going back to the principles of feed the body what it needs and cannot make, I'm always thinking about what's the most important fats. And EPA and DHA is the really important fats we need for our brain function, for our immune system, for our cellular health. And that's coming from oily fish, mainly, and you do get it from plant sources, so walnuts, chia seeds, flax seeds, but they need converting down to EPA and DHA, which is the form the body can use to function well. So fats play a really important role in that. And then we have other fats that have been shown in research to be beneficial, like oleic acid and olive oil. And we also have saturated fats that's available from whole foods. So my view on fats is that, you know, prioritizing omega-3s is really important if you can, right? Really, really important. And then when you're building fats into your diet from other sources, the most important decision you make outside of that is, has this come from nature? Is it from a whole food? How processed is it? So we want to be thinking about fats that are coming from animal sources, where you've got saturated fats, and meats are going to be, when they come from good quality meats, they're going to be okay for us. Whereas if you're going to be eating a highly processed fat that's hydrogenated, or in processed foods that shouldn't be there, or potentially oils that have been highly processed, so lots of seed oils, then the body doesn't like those so much, and they're not going to have they're not going to help us function well. So absolutely fats play a role, but EPA, DHA are the major fats we should be trying to get, because we need them more. You know, fats are also important for cellular membranes and brain function, particularly cholesterol. You know, the body makes all the cholesterol it needs to function. So we don't actually need to eat it, but we can eat it, and it's not going to have a necessarily negative impact. I mean, that depends on the individual, plus lots of other elements. I think most people get concerned about fat when the concern should be about sugar and processed foods, because those foods have more of a negative impact on heart disease and health than necessarily fats from whole foods. So it can get more complicated and nuanced depending on an individual. So I appreciate that.
It's funny. I can see just from asking you what seems to the average person like me, it seems like a really normal question. What about fats? I can see how hard your brain is working to like get all the different things you need to say without saying too much. It's one little question becomes so complicated in your world. I think it's and then
it does.
when you individualize it.
Yeah, it does. And when when I'm working with clients and I'm measuring their bloods, we'll look at their fats and we'll understand how well their fats are managed in their body. And I think, and I put a lot of this in one of the chapters in the book. There's lots of concerns around cholesterol and high cholesterol, and cholesterol is a really complex subject. But when you're thinking about cholesterol in the body, the problem is when that cholesterol becomes damaged or can become damaged inside the body, that's when it drives inflammation, and that has a greater risk for heart disease. And that is very much coming from unprocessed foods, inflammatory fats, too much sugar, maybe overconsumption of carbohydrates. And so it is a nuanced story, and everybody is unique within the picture. But I think if you're eating whole foods, you're eating natural fats, you're prioritizing omega-3s, you're balancing your blood sugar, you're not eating too processed foods, then you're more than likely going to be supporting your health.
So when you're working with a client and you're recommending for them to kind of give you a blood test, I'd like to ask, just because a lot of people that will be watching this are probably thinking about their balancing their blood sugar, they're thinking about eating whole food. Should they be looking at doing regular blood tests, and what should they learn from them?
Yeah, absolutely. We should all be running a good metabolic panel annually. Okay. And the reason being is you want to understand where your baseline levels are. And baseline levels, I'm talking about blood sugar, so HbA1c, I'm talking about fasting glucose, potentially insulin.
Sarah, sorry, let's take one step at a time. HbA1c, what is it? What does it mean?
So HbA1c is a long-term sugar marker. So what it's doing is it's essentially looking at how much sugar is attached to a hemoglobin molecule, okay, to a red blood cell. And we measure if the blood is what we call sticky, if it's sugary. If the blood is a bit sticky or sugary, then the HbA1c will be potentially higher. And it looks at average blood sugar over 3 months. Typically, a GP will look at HbA1c when they want to assess pre-diabetes or diabetes. Okay, but it's a longer-term sugar marker, so it's not giving you your day-to-day variation in blood sugar, but it's giving you, what an average of 3 months looks like. Okay, and in addition to that, we should be looking at a lipid panel where we want to be looking at your cholesterol. But when we're thinking about cholesterol, the most important numbers we can use to give us an indication of heart disease risk is probably HDL-C, which is sometimes named good cholesterol, and triglycerides. When you look at your triglyceride HDL ratio, it gives you an indication of your heart disease risk. Okay.
So a lipid panel looks at fat inside your bloodstream, is that right?
Yeah. So it's assessing. Well, the thing about cholesterol, it's looking at the number of cholesterol molecules in the blood, but it's not specific. It's an average. And therefore, if somebody is struggling with high cholesterol, then you can run more detailed markers looking at the exact particle number and the exact particle size that's giving you a bit more insight on heart disease risk. So cholesterol is, as I said, it's the average number of particles, cholesterol particles in the blood. And that's what a GP will look at to predict heart disease. But we want to look at that in conjunction with blood sugar And you probably want to know how your liver's functioning. You probably want to know some of your key nutrients as well, so B12, folate, vitamin D. But from a metabolic standpoint, running a full blood panel, particularly the cholesterol markers, understanding your sugar levels, is a good way to check in with your health year on year. Because what we do know is that heart disease is still the #1 killer, and it's a silent disease. And we do know that it's driven by the body being in an environment or that it shouldn't be in. So high blood pressure or high blood sugar or inflammation of the arteries or something like high homocysteine. So checking in with your bloods annually is a way for you to assess your health year on year, stay on track, understand your risk factors. And if things start to shift, ask yourself, okay, how have I been the last year? What's changed? How am I sleeping? What's my nutrition like? And you become, you have a sense of self-responsibility when you do that. And I think that's really important when you're thinking about navigating today's world. You know, we need to be taking care of ourselves. We need to understand our system a little bit more to protect ourselves. So by running those markers gives you that sort of ability to be accountable to yourself.
Mm-hmm. I guess you really start to understand your body when you're regularly benchmarking year on year, and you can see how you're changing yourself with the various actions. One of
Yeah.
the changes that I've just seen Andrew write in the chat, he wants me to ask you, what do you think when it comes to people who are taking weight loss drugs, the GLP-1 drugs that everyone's talking about, do you think they are a good thing or a bad thing from your kind of professional work?
So context is really important here, you know, understanding what that individual's health is and what they're up against, whether the jab is going to be beneficial to them. Now, what we know is that the medication is designed for people who are diabetic. And I have a number of clients on the medication, a number of clients off the medication. And we see, you know, you do see benefits of improved glucose markers, improved lipid profiles, lower inflammation as well. But the important thing with the drugs, and you know, I have a client I'm working with at the moment who's just started them, is that they enable some people to have the ability to start changing their nutrition. So if you're in a situation where you're not eating well, you don't understand the role of food, and you're using the drugs or the GLP-1s to support weight loss, this is also an opportunity to change your nutrition through taking those medications. Because if you don't, then the risk factors of increasing weight at the end of the time you're on the medication could go up. So we know that they can have challenges, they can cause symptoms around nausea, digestive issues, acid reflux. And there is a link between the drugs and, you know, risk of muscle mass. So if you're taking them, you need to make sure that when you are eating, you're eating really, really well. Because we also see nutrient depletions in these drugs when people aren't eating proper nutrient-rich diets. And there's cases of people losing their hair and their skin changing. So, and that is because, you know, your appetite's gone down, you're not eating as much, and there's a risk of being some nutrient depletions there. So it really, you know, they do have a role, but also nutrition is vital when you're using them. And it's really important that you invest in eating well and changing your behaviors while you're on these medications, so that when you come off them, you're fully ingrained in eating good, nutritious food to build health, to balance your blood sugar, to build your your muscle mass and support your bone health. So it's almost as if they're a gateway to go from A to B, as long as you are putting the energy into eating well and changing your nutrition.
So they're a change agent, but what you think is, in fact, don't let me put the words in your mouth. What do you think of people taking them for the rest of their lives? The way the drug companies think that you should be able to.
Well, I don't think that's what we know. Is we don't know the impact of these drugs on the entire body, and I think we know that there's GLP-1 receptors in all sorts of organs around the body, and we don't know what's happening to. We don't know the impact on these. The drugs are early days, and they are showing promise in weight loss, but they're designed to only be on them for 2 years and no longer. And the other part of this is you want to be on the lowest level doses you possibly can. Ideally, you don't want to be going to high doses.
Mhm.
So, I see it as you said, a gateway solution. I think the long-term use of these drugs could have more negative impacts that we're unaware of, and could have longer-term changes into, your hunger hormone system, your eating behaviors, how your body is taking on nutrients. I think there is a risk if you're using them for too long, potentially.
Right. I mean, I run a company that advocates for using habits to change your lifestyle and to maintain your weight using lifestyle changes. So I'm fully in agreement with actually moving into eating things like whole food. I think I've been through a journey of weight loss as well, and through learning. I think I accidentally became wildly overweight. When I was a stay-at-home dad, and when I kind of changed and recovered, went back to my set point that I've been most of my life, I think what I realized is how much more energy I had mentally to do things, which was really important to me. And now I think about, I don't really think about weight loss anymore. I think much more about maintaining that energy. And I know that's a lot of the work that you've done. You've kind of worked with people on things like brain fog and focus and stuff like that. What's your key approach for people when it comes to making sure they have mental energy?
Well, I always position everything I do about energy, because I think we understand energy, right? As individuals, we know what good energy feels like, and we know when we don't feel good. And I think energy is an entry point to a place where, if your energy is low and you're not feeling your best, then something's got to change, right? And we all know what good energy feels like versus bad energy. When I'm thinking about somebody who's struggling with brain energy, I'm immediately thinking about, okay, when I work with any client, I assess their life rhythm. So not just their nutrition, like what is their behaviors around their life? What time they're getting up? What do they do when they first wake up? When do they have water? When do they get outside? When's their first breakfast? Who are they associating with? What's their lunch look like? How much exercise are they having? What time are they going to bed? What do they do before their bed? How are they getting to sleep? So when you're thinking about brain fog or brain energy, the body and the brain are totally connected. So when you're thinking about optimizing that brain energy, you just got to optimize your body, your health, right? And all of those aspects matter. So all of the rhythms of life plus nutrition really matter. And stress. Okay, so stress plays a part in that. So when I'm assessing somebody, and I've gone through their life rhythm, the first things I'll be thinking about is circadian rhythm, so proper sleep at night, waking up in the morning. And then I'll be thinking about how they're starting their day. What's their first meal like? How much hydration are they getting? Are they feeding their body and brain the nutrients it needs? But it's not just one thing, it's everything. And you'll always find some area within somebody's life that may be driving that imbalance. And it could be nutrition, it could be poor sleep, it could be overwhelm, it could be stress, it could be gut dysfunction, gut dysbiosis. It could be nutrient deficiencies. My job is to assess the individual, identify potential imbalances, and then go, okay, right, let's work on these one at a time and let's see how your energy is. So it's not one size fits all, but it's just everything that you do, how you live, how you breathe, what you eat, who you interact with, how you eat, impact your energy. And yes, food is definitely a big part of that. And if there's any inflammation in the body, that's also going to be driving down that energy.
It's become very obvious why you needed to write the book that you wrote. There's a lot to say. Can you tell us about the book? Tell us about what if I were to buy it tomorrow? What will I find in it? What's the point of it?
So I wrote the book as based on how I've worked with a number of clients. You know, what is it I do when I'm changing clients' nutrition? So the book is about nutrition predominantly, and I'm thinking about pillars of resilience. Nutrition is a really important one of those pillars. And so what the book does is it breaks down week by week little challenges or teaches you how to eat well. And it starts with a meal. It starts with breakfast, right? You know, how are you going to wake up well and eat breakfast, and what does that breakfast look like? And so I talk about what a balanced breakfast is, and we go through what I call the pillars of resilience. And each pillar is associated to a macronutrient that's really important to you. And there is a section on micronutrients. And how I teach the book is, rather than teaching somebody, okay, about proteins and fiber, I break them down into each chapter and I get them to change one thing a week. So if you don't know anything about nutrition, or you know that you want to change the way you're eating, you can pick up the book and you can go, okay, right, turn to chapter 1, which is about, let's assess my nutrition first of all. You know, what does my nutrition look like? And I give you a really simple traffic light system. And then I go into, right, we're going to start with waking up well. What does your breakfast look like? And every week you just change one thing across your eating. So for 1 week you work on breakfast. Then week 2 you work on protein. What does that look like? How do I eat more protein in each meal? Then you'll work on week 4, you'll work on your carbohydrate choices. What's a good carbohydrate choice? What's high in fiber? Then we work on fats. And it goes through this logical order so you can just understand one thing at a time, address that across your meals, and then move on. So it's small step changes. And what I thought was probably the simplest way to help people change their nutrition. The other part of this book was, if I give a client recipes and say, right, here's your 7-day meal plan, no one will very rarely follow the 7-day meal plan because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of energy. I have to cook all these 7 things or all these foods across 7 days. I'm never going to do that. So the way this works is you take what you're currently eating across every meal and you adapt one thing in your existing eating behaviors. So you're not changing everything. So for example, let's say for breakfast, you're having Weetabix. Well, you might just have Weetabix with a handful of nuts to begin with. And then lunch, you might have a sandwich, but we might say, well, let's have a sandwich with a side salad. So you're starting to layer in foods and starting to remove food. So it becomes very adaptive, very easy, little working memory. And you can simply start making those changes, and in time they become habits.
I like that. My kids started reading a book with me yesterday where a dad had emptied out the contents of his fridge and replaced all the junk food that's normally in there for his son with just green things, just to illustrate how boring that was. And they just asked, well, why would you do that? Which was quite funny. But it really reminded me of what, I mean, I've been through it a million times. You decide that everything's going to change. I mean, it's coming up to New Year's Day. Everything's going to change and I'm going to be different. And what I found from working with so many people, hundreds of people I've talked to now, that change, most people don't make it to 2 weeks. Because it's just overwhelming. Whether it's a plan that's been made for you by a professional or it's been taken from a book, I really struggle with books like this that expect me to, I've got loads of them behind me, they expect me to do certain things, but they don't give me the team of the shopping assistant, the cook, the person who's going to clean up after all the mess I've made with it as well. So I love this approach. It's just changing the one little thing at a time, which is fantastic. Tell me what kind of things did you find surprising in your research for the book? What were the things that really were unexpected for you?
In the research of the book, oh gosh.
Maybe an easier one is, what kind of myths did you bust with the book?
Oh, well, I mean, when I wrote the book, I spent a lot of time on fats. We just talked about that. And actually, the publisher said to me, Sarah, you've got to simplify this, you've got to take it all out, because I ended up writing the whole history of, you know, how margarine came to be, and Ansel Keys's original research around, you know, saturated fats and heart disease. And I still think today it's still the biggest area that people struggle with around health. You know, fats, should I be eating them, should I not be eating them? And so anyway, that's probably the area that I spent most of the research on, and then the publisher told me to reduce it because it was too science-based. And I think that, you know, in terms of the area that I love to talk about and didn't have enough time in the book is just the role of the gut. You know, the gut and the microbiome is so central to our function and our resilience, not just from the capacity, the fact that if the gut doesn't work well, we can't break down our food. But if we have a really diverse microbiome and we have the right bacteria in the gut, and I talk particularly one called Akkermansia, you know, we've seen in research today that there's a connection between the gut and how well we handle our sugar, you know, how well we, our cardiovascular health, our brain health. And that's sort of, you know, that is the area that I spent a lot of time also researching, but only could keep it quite simple in the book. But the idea is that, you know, when we build a really strong microbiome, and we do that from predominantly prebiotic foods, so from plant-based foods, we have a greater propensity to build our resilience, protect our immunity, support our brain function, support our metabolic health. And the science behind it is immense, but the solution is simple. You know, just eat more veg, eat colourful veg, eat herbs, spices, you know, things that we've been doing for years. And one of the other things I loved that I can't remember if I wrote this in the book when I was looking at this, is I've always had this concern that people think healthy can be boring, right? They always think healthy food is boring and it's not tasty. When, you know, it's completely not true. And in the book, I talk about where you get flavor and taste from. There's a whole section on polyphenols. And we think real food isn't tasty because we're led to believe it's not, because when we go into supermarkets, they throw color and processed stuff at us and chemicals to say that this is what tastes good. And it basically hijacked our brain and our taste buds. When you rip all that out and you start eating herbs and spices, and particularly spices, there was some lovely research that said the more spices you eat, and I can't remember exactly what the amount was, it changes your taste buds and you get greater enjoyment from your food. So not only are these spices bringing color and vibrance to your plate and flavor, they're changing your taste buds so you enjoy more of your food. And this is the problem with the processed food industry. You know, they steal that beauty that we have inside of us to be able to enjoy those things because our brain is hijacked. When we take those things away and we use what nature provides, you know, we can get greater enjoyment from our food. And I get lots of clients saying to me, oh, well, I get a bit bored. And I'm like, you're not actually bored. You're just not using spices. You're not using herbs. You're not using, you know, salad dressings. And I think one of the sections I've put at the back is all about how to make pestos, how to make rubs and seasonings and salad dressings, because nature provides our proteins and our vegetables. And the vegetables are seasonal, the proteins are minimal in choices. But the spices are rich in diversity, and that is what changes our flavoring around what we eat. And that's, you know, and it supports our health. So that's probably one of the areas I enjoyed writing the most and would, you know, love to continue to get more into. And what, you know, when you look at the role of flavonoids and brain function as well, I mean, I've got a couple, you know, it's just phenomenal what, you know, these things do for us, and they're all provided for us by this world that we live in.
Do you know what I am seeing in like supermarket aisles? when you go to the spice aisle used to be quite boring. It used to be, there just used to be whatever Schwartz or stuff from your grandmother's kitchen in the olden days. And you'd have to go to a specialist shop, like the one I grew up in. I actually grew up in a spice shop, weirdly enough. And you'd have to go somewhere special for the special spices. But recently, what I've been finding is lots of different, highly branded. It's like grown up Coco the monkey, but he's on a peri peri rub or a steak rub. You can get these really like nice looking ones that kind of draw you in. Which definitely worked on me. Brightly coloured things that make your kitchen look nice. I was well up for that. So I think I'll put a few of those up actually. I think there's some really good ones out there. So if you don't want to go and get the actual spices, I don't think Sarah, you're saying go and buy just base spices and buy one of those pestles and mortars because not everybody's got time for that, right? You can also just add these.
Yeah, I'm also saying just open your kitchen cupboard because everyone has spices. You just don't use them. Open your kitchen cupboard and just go and say, what have I got? Oh, I'll just chuck it on my veg. And
Right.
another thing you can do is get a pepper pot, fill it up with whole spices, not the already ground spices, and just sprinkle it over your food. Done. Don't even think about it. Just, all these flavors marry well together pretty much. Create a spice pot and just season your food.
I'm going to do that in my kitchen tomorrow. I think that's a great idea. So can I ask you one last question about what you're doing for work at the moment? So I know because I've talked to you behind the scenes about this.
Mhm.
You're kind of going into a new direction of research at the moment. What kind of things are you working on?
So at the moment, I am still seeing private clients, and at the same time, I do some corporate works and workshops, and I'm working on those as well with different clients. But the sort of new area of work or research is mainly in quantum biology. So it's all about circadian rhythm and it's all about light.
What? Let me just wind it back. What does quantum biology mean? Because that's very complicated sounding.
Yeah, I'm still learning what exactly that means.
Okay.
Essentially, it's taking the body at the very minute level. So interaction between atoms and electrons and understanding how they behave and what excites them and how that changes our function. So it's like very minute. It's almost lower than when you're thinking about um, biochemistry. It's like a layer down. So it's almost physics, chemistry, and biology together. So bringing physics back into it is something that's quite new for me. So essentially, why I'm doing this is because the body, we as humans, run on a circadian rhythm, and that circadian rhythm is very much led by light and our interaction with light, not outside with the sun, but also how the impact of light in our environment. So I'm basically doing some work to understand the impact of this more deeply on our biology. And there's been, circadian rhythm and understanding circadian rhythm has been something that's been around, maybe 10, 15 years, but quantum biology is pretty new and it's really starting to look at how the mitochondria is working, actually how those electrons go down that electron transport chain. What is the mitochondria's relationship to other cells? How is the mitochondria, which is a powerhouse in our cell, how is it really supporting antioxidant capacity and repair? How is our light environment, our interaction with our light environment, impacting how that mitochondria works? And it has a direct impact. And when we think about nutrition and we think about wellness, it's sort of an area that has been overlooked. And we're starting to see some data around not only artificial blue light at night, we know has an impact on sleep, but it has a greater impact on mitochondrial dysfunction and repair mechanisms, and also on metabolic health. So I'm sort of going back to the very basics to understand those interconnections a bit stronger, which is fascinating, but also opening up a whole new world of physics, which
Right. A whole new subject.
a whole new...
It does sound amazing. I am really still trying to understand. So for me, watching, I've worked in watching people's blood glucose for a while, and when you add thousands of people's blood glucose, thousands of people who are monitoring their blood glucose live, using continuous glucose monitors and not like self-reporting, what you start to notice is everybody's blood glucose does the same thing over the period of a day. And it's quite a fascinating thing to see just in the data. I don't necessarily know what it means, it's not my expertise. But what you're seeing is that even shift workers, their blood glucose is going up and down during the day in a similar pattern to other people's, even though they're living in a different time zone to everyone else. It seems that the same go to bed signals are happening from just, I guess, circadian rhythms from where they live. And maybe that's the light and the glucose and the energy. Maybe that's the answer to why shift workers are kind of shortening their lives almost. Because
I mean, there's definitely a lot of science around the artificial light impacting blood glucose levels at the wrong time of day, and therefore disrupting circadian rhythm. And
in what way? So how does artificial light affect blood glucose?
So this is basically going to what I'm learning to understand more. But essentially, when you're looking at light biology, the sun gives off different wavelengths of light, and there's color and UV and infrared. So you've got color light spectrum plus UV and infrared, which you can't see. Blue light by the sun is a daytime signal. So when your eyes see the light in the morning from the sun, they are picking up the blue. The blue sends a message from the eyes to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and it basically tells you that this human is awake and they should be on. So
this very complicated word that you mentioned, is that like your master circadian clock?
Suprachiasmatic nucleus.
Yeah.
So it's the master clock in the brain that almost dictates how every other peripheral clock will work. So you get up, your brain sees this, and it switches the body on. When the body switches on, it tells every organ in the body what time of day it is and what they need to do. So that light signal from the sun is blue light. So when the eyes see blue light, they think it's daytime. Okay. That blue light from the sun is wrapped with red light, infrared, UV, violet, green. It's all wrapped up in this one beautiful sun. When you come into our homes at night and we have artificial light, it's just blue, and it's artificial blue light. So if the blue light is a signal for daytime, if you're sitting at home like we are now and you're under a UV light, you're under, LED lighting, it's a blue light, you're sending a signal to the brain that it's daytime. In the daytime, your body increases cortisol response, okay? So as we wake up in the morning, 30 minutes of waking, we get a cortisol rise. And cortisol is telling the body to turn itself on, okay? When we have cortisol on, blood sugar goes up. And naturally what happens is cortisol should drop as your day goes on. You have lowest cortisol at night, and because you want to go to sleep, right? And melatonin cannot be produced if there's cortisol around, or cannot be excreted as well. So artificial light at night is essentially telling your body it's the middle of the day, and it's increasing glucose output, potentially increasing heart rate. And we see studies that have shown this artificial light at night impacting metabolic health because of this light signal that we're getting. And what I'm studying at the moment is directly this light signal on the mitochondria, all of the different light signals, and how infrared versus red versus blue versus violet versus green affects our biology. But the light isn't just seen by the eyes, it's also seen by the skin. And what we know is that there's certain wavelengths of light, particularly UV wavelengths of light, that can actually increase hunger hormones and support metabolism. So that is what essentially I'm just studying at the moment. How is this light changing our metabolism and our function and our sleep and our recovery and our melatonin production? So back to your question, if we're increasing cortisol at night because we've got more blue light coming in, we're going to get raises in blood glucose. Now, whether we're picking that up on a CGM, who knows? This could be minute levels. We're talking about, is it changing how the mitochondria is functioning? That's the question.
So I guess we could probably have a look at it. Well, for example, Nico members could look at it by trying to change that stuff and see what happens to their blood glucose over time.
Yeah, there was an amazing biobank study in the UK, 89,000 people, and they had light detectors on them. And I think the stats for that are quite shocking in terms of, I think there was something like, I can't quote me, but it was in the 40s. There was a 40% greater risk of mortality from all causes with the greater exposure to blue light at night.
Wow.
But yeah, you're right, that we could definitely have a look at if we can pick that up with glucose monitors.
Well, I think it's something that definitely Nico doesn't look at very much, light. So I'll pick that up with you at some point if that's good. I think it's something we need to learn more about. So can I ask you to leave me with one thing, that if you could tell the audience one thing that would bring about a change for them tomorrow, what change would you suggest they make?
Start your day well. So you wake up in the
Great.
morning and don't look at your phone, drink some water, have some breakfast, get outside. That's it. Start your day well. I mean, most of us get up in the morning, we look at our phone, we are already in stress mode, potentially not even considering our health. I think if you can start your day well, it's the very first place to begin. And for me, that is generally wake up, get outside, drink some water, eat a good breakfast. I know that's more than one thing, but if we start with, what can you do to start your day well?
I love it. I'm going to start my day well. I keep starting my day with my phone recently. It's something that it's quite a depressing habit. So everybody, tomorrow we're going to start our day well, and let's try and do it every day. Sarah, thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I've certainly learned a few things as well, and I think we all look forward to the next book.
Thank you again for having me. It's a real honor to be here, and I really enjoyed speaking to you, so thank you.
It's great to have you. Just before we go, can people buy the book anywhere? How do we get hold of your book?
Yeah, it's on Amazon, it's on Waterstones, it's on most major book store providers. You'll find it online, and you can buy it directly from the publisher as well.
Great, and it's called Do Nourish.
Do Nourish, How to Eat for Resilience.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sarah. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.